start of struggle against the Stalinist regime in 1950s. Stalin died in 1953. A struggle for power began in the USSR, during which some of the highest representatives of the nomenclatura, such as Beria and Sudoplatov, died or were thrown into prison for significant periods. The nomenclatura, wanting to free itself from the fear that hung over it during the rule of Stalin, began a policy of half-hearted de-Stalinization. The 20th Congress of the CPSU was held, at which Khrushchev made his secret report regarding Stalin. It is curious that Berat was present at the Congress and was a firm Stalinist, died after this report. How accidental this death was can only be guessed. In Poland, during this period, material difficulties began. On June 28, 1956, in Poznan, an armed clash occurred between security officers and workers who demanded bread and took anti-government positions. We read in Poland in 20th century. A shootout began between demonstrators and security officers, and it is still unclear who opened fire first. The shots signaled the beginning of an orgy, which stopped only when regular units of the Polish army arrived in the city: tanks, armored personnel carriers, and infantry. During the firefight, especially after, on Ochab's instructions, an order was given to open fire if necessary, people died. According to updated estimates, there were 57 people killed, and there were hundreds of wounded. The explosion of discontent in Poznan became the first loud sign of the crisis of the Stalinist regime in Poland. There were no preventive measures aimed at improving the living conditions of workers. The legislation of the Polish People's Republic did not provide for more or less effective measures for resolving conflicts on socio-economic grounds. The settlement of industrial disputes was entrusted to trade unions, but they had long been tightly controlled by party bodies. Both turned a blind eye to the abuses of enterprise administrations. In an attempt to solve the food problem, the Polish authorities went to restore private farming in the countryside. Gomulka spoke in favor of strengthening individual peasant farming instead of collective farms. The peasantry greeted this proposal with approval, and at the same time with a massive withdrawal from agricultural production cooperatives. This process has become irreversible. In rural areas, out of 10,203 production cooperatives that were officially registered at the end of September 1956, at the end of the year 1956, there were 1,520, or 15% left. In addition to taking steps towards the kulak, that is the strong peasant, the rich peasant, the PZPR made steps towards the Catholic Church. To stabilize the situation, Gomułka decided to reconsider the party and state policy towards the Catholic Church. Taking into account the deep traditions of Catholicism in Poland, its extremely strong influence in society, he took a number of important steps towards the Church, and direct contacts with secular Catholic circles were intensified, in particular with the Association of Secular Catholics, PAX. Obstacles to the opening of clubs for Catholic intellectuals in Warsaw, Krakow, Wrocław, Lublin, Lodz, Torun were removed. The popular Krakow Catholic Weekly was returned to its former publishers, and editors Tygodnik Powszechny, and most importantly, the spiritual shepherd of the believers, Cardinal Wyszynski, was released from isolation in one of the monasteries. In addition, the Polish government met the wishes of the intelligentsia. Karol Modzelewski writes, "A Polish peculiarity after 1956 was the liberalism of the communist state in relation to the creative intelligentsia, cultural figures, scientists, and teachers of higher educational institutions. One could expect that the kindness of the political authorities coming from above in relation to intellectuals would be similar to the proverb, 'The lordly flavor is fickle.' Nevertheless, Gomułka's team left the intelligentsia with some freedom, considering it a kind of security valve. If they cannot do without it, then let them make some noise in the widely circulated publications, and at university seminars, and in theater halls. This is much better than if they were trying to enter the territory of political action reserved only for the party." Thus, a trend has emerged. The bureaucracy responds to labor and popular unrest with a partial restoration of capitalism and democratization of the regime. Section 8. A Stalinist regime spurns the youth and left intellectuals. 1960s. The thaw for the Polish intelligentsia, as well as for the Soviet one, did not last long. Quote, "In December 1962, by order of the authorities, the Crooked Wheel Club, which had significant weight in the intellectual and cultural life of Warsaw, was closed. The club's gallery showed the best examples of contemporary art. Its theater presented the most interesting productions of European prose, and its Thursday meetings were a veritable Hyde Park of the capital. The club attracted the country's scientific elite. The largest group among its members were sociologists, 46 people, and journalists, 44. Regular visitors to the club were about 300 people. Economists Bruce and Bobrovsky, historian Geisztor, publicist Kiselewski, philosopher Kotarbiński, poet Slonimsky, philosopher Kolakowski, and others took part in the discussions. Further, we read in Poland in 20th century, quote, "A similar fate befell the discussion club of school youth, the Contradiction Seekers Club, which was created by Kuron's pupils in the far-left Walter Squads of the Union of Polish Scouts, so named in memory of the hero of the Civil War in Spain, General Swierczewski, Walter. The patronage of the club was taken by Jacek Kuron, Matuszewski, and Schaff, who explained his position by the fact that any Marxist thought, even revisionist, is worth its weight in gold. Among the members of this club included many children of high-ranking officials, scientists, and publicists. Thus, the most intelligent and progressive people are rejected by the regime. It is pestered by mediocrities in darkened glasses, such as General Yaroselsky. Quote, after the closure of the political club, Kuran and Madzilevsky tried to continue their activities semi-legally. Gathering in private apartments, they, together with their like-minded people, discussed the problems of Marxism and the labor movement. These two oppositionists prepared an extensive 128-page program manifesto outlining their views on political and the economic situation in the country. For the publication and dissemination of this manifesto, Kuron and Madzilevsky were expelled from the PZPR in November 1964. In March 1965, they issued an open letter to the primary party organization of the University Organization of the Union of Socialist Youth, in which they repeated the main provisions of manifesto. The open letter to the party existed in only 14 typed copies. However, it was later published in the Parisian Polish magazine Culture and read on the American radio Free Europe. For this letter, Kuron received 3 years in prison and Madzilevsky 3.5. Madzilevsky received a longer sentence for being a Jew. As he wrote above, a neo-Stalinist regime is pursuing an anti-Semitic policy. The regime in society during the Stalin era and after it cannot be called the same. In Let's Drive the Neck of History, Madzilevsky writes, quote, unlike theorists who study models of dictatorial regimes, I spent a total of 8.5 years in the Polish prisons of the times of Gomulka, Gierek, and Jaroselsky. The difference between what was then my fate and Stalin's practice of investigation, trial, and imprisonment is huge. Maybe this is an overtly personal point of view, but I cannot agree that it is insignificant. For me, it is important. The difference to which I attach such significant importance was mainly, though not exclusively, a consequence of the abolition and condemnation of Stalinist terror. I am not going to argue about the definition of the concepts of totalitarianism and authoritarianism. I just do not agree to deny the essential difference between the communist dictatorship of the times of Beirut and the times of Gomulka.